Hi guys, afternoon.
And the random French potato.
And today we're going to be doing another podcast, but this one's going to be about it. I know this movie came out on the 8th, but it's the 12th right now. So I think the first couple days I had like stuff to do, but now I just got lazy, so I thought I'd do it now. So yeah, I liked it. I thought it was good. I'm really glad to see that it wasn't like too much like the miniseries, and it wasn't like trying to be like the miniseries, and I'm really glad that it came out that way since people were familiar with the miniseries and that's what they wanted Pennywise to be like Tim Curry and everything, but I'm really glad that they tried to be different in this movie, and I like how it's a lot more faithful to the book since the book is very violent, but the miniseries couldn't be that violent because it was like for TV and everything. So yeah, now that the movie is out, it's rated R, and I was actually pretty glad to hear that. And the book really is probably a little more violent than the film, but it's still really good. The only thing that I had like with the movie that kind of took me out of it was really sometimes the CGI was a little cheesy, but for the most part it was pretty good. Yeah.
I thought it was gonna have the opposite problem, really. I thought it was gonna kind of try to differ too much from the old miniseries and be like, try to be as much of a modern horror movie as possible. But actually, it was a great balance, and that's what made me like the movie so much, and that's what I think what made the movie great. And if any of you have ever seen the movie Stand By Me, which is also a Stephen King story, it reminded me a lot of that because the theme, mostly because of the theme of children, but it's has that theme with the horror elements mixed in with it. And at first, in the beginning of the movie, you could see kind of a big contrast between those moments, but it sort of blended all in at the end, and that was pretty well done in my opinion. The actual horror part of the movie in the violence was, I don't think it was too overdone actually, and it didn't try to be for shock value. I thought it was placed well and wasn't all jump scares. It was also creepy. And speaking of which, I love to see the new Pennywise because in quite frankly in the miniseries, to me he didn't look that scary at all, even when they tried to make him like that.
Well, in the miniseries, the look of Pennywise was a little more accurate to the book because in the book and the miniseries, he's very colorful, like a normal clown. But I really like what the movie did with that because they gave it a new look, really to make him a little more scarier, but also to show what, like, how he's sort of immortal, immortal, since he's, I guess when he got the clown outfit, it was from a long time ago. I can't really phrase that well, but you can tell that it's not modern, um, which is something that I didn't like about the new design because really it was only red and white, but I really have gotten used to it um, since the images were released of him, and the kids in this and the newer one were a lot more realistic. Um, Obviously, like with all the like the cursing and everything, because in the original miniseries they weren't really like that, but the miniseries took place in the 50s, and so does the novel, and the new movie takes place in the 80s, like when they're kids. So when they're adults, it's gonna be like 27 years. So it's gonna when they're adults, it's gonna be like it's gonna take place in 2016. Cause the new movie I think takes place in 1989. But the one thing I didn't like about the not really the kids, but people have said that each kid gets like their own like balanced amount of screen time rather than focusing on like one person throughout the whole movie. But Bill is like sort of the main character, and he does get the story really revolves around him, and he he is like the main character, but everybody else in the Losers Club has a good amount of screen time, except for like Mike, Ben, and Stanley. Those three characters, I feel like, were sort of just in the back. They had some pretty important roles in the movie, but really they weren't, like, they didn't have a lot of lines or anything, and it really felt like Bill, Beverly, and Richie, and sort of Eddie were like who the story focused around mainly, which was a little, because in like the book and the miniseries it really does do a good job at really not focusing on Bill as the main character, but all seven of them as the main characters. But in the movie, it's really more focused on a small group of people, even though there is like Ben, Mike, and Stan. They all have really generic names, but I really thought that they were great actors, but they just didn't have a big part in the movie, which is really something that it's like the first thing that I noticed when I watched it.
One of the things that really brought the film to life that I didn't really think about until afterwards was the acting of really all the main characters. Bill Skarsgård did played Pennywise very well. He sort of he really did a good job embodying him, and apparently I'm not the only one to think this, but in my opinion he should like play the Joker if he's ever in a new DC movie. But that's that's just my opinion, because he does play psychotic clowns apparently very well. But with the kids, as far as the kids went, I didn't really think about their acting much at first, because I was more focused on the movie itself and its point. But yeah, the kids did a pretty good job, and even though it's an R-rated film with a lot of horror elements, they acted them very well. They acted like sort of your everyday kids you would see all the time, like in your sort of the neighborhood group of friends that just likes to hang out with each other.
Really, my top three favorite actors were Richie, Eddie, and Pennywise, or my favorite characters, because they all did such a great job, and I really like Richie the most since in the original, like the miniseries. Again, I hate to compare this to the miniseries, especially so often, but in the miniseries, Richie was played by Seth Green, and he was really just like this nerdy 50s kid who was like kind of annoying most of the time, but I did, his character was still a little enjoyable, but Richie in the new one is, they didn't make him as nerdy, but it's still noticeable that he is a nerd, which is something that I really like about the new film. I thought his character got had a lot of work done on him, and like going to the Georgie scene, the actor that played Georgie also did a great job. Even though he wasn't in the movie for too long, I thought that scene was really good. It's just they were sort of like this this mix of like original dialogue and dialogue from the book, and it feels like they cut some stuff out, but I don't think they cut too much stuff out, and I thought that they did a really good job doing that, especially what the miniseries did was pretty faithful to the book also, but I really like this version because that scene went on for a while, so there was a lot of back and forth dialogue between Georgie and Pennywise.
I think that's probably the most iconic scene of the book, and in my opinion, they didn't seem to cut some of it off, but it seemed not pretty lengthy to me. Just it seemed like enough, really. One of the things that happens nowadays with sequels and remakes and stuff is people's logic is that since a movie already has previous material to go off of, it should be good in its own right and still do well in theaters and do well as a movie, but that just really hasn't been reality. But I think this film actually kind of broke that. It really did good as a film based off of the book, and that was supposed to contrast the series before, which everyone knows about.
I feel like a lot of people were like a little like too used to Tim Curry's performance. That at first Bill Skarsgård didn't get a lot of people didn't really like him too much, but I really think he did like a great job, and it seems like all the actors there think the same about him. because he really knows like how to play the character. And at first, when I heard about him playing the character, I was a little disappointed because I didn't know who he was, so I really didn't know a lot about how he acts. But when I saw the trailers, I thought that he looked alright, and when I actually saw the movie, he's definitely like my favorite actor who's played them. And there's only been Tim Curry and Bill Skarsgård, and I did think that Tim Curry did a really great job as Pennywise, since Pennywise really is sort of a clown, especially in the book. He kind of talks like one, and he can act like one sometimes. But in the new movie, I think it really focused on the horror part of Pennywise and his character. But one thing that I was a little disappointed though is that he didn't have a lot of dialogue, and when he did, it was usually like short sentences, which were interrupted.
Yeah, the only really long dialogue he seemed to have was, in the beginning when he was talking to Georgie. And I thought he did that pretty well, but it was kind of disappointing to see that, kind of go to waste and him only having short amounts of dialogue throughout the film after that, because it definitely caught my eye when I saw that, and it made me interested in seeing the rest of the movie, and it kind of gave me a new outlook on I guess the story itself. But one of the things that I think was done that was done right, that I really enjoyed was, obviously I mentioned how I liked the new costume for Pennywise, and I really think that it's good in comparison to Tim Curry's costume, because when I watched the miniseries with Tim Curry, I couldn't really take him seriously, because he seemed too much to me like a regular circus clown that you would point and laugh at, and you would just you don't take him seriously, because he's a clown. He's supposed to make you laugh. But with the new costume, it really kind of gives it sort of an edge. It gives the character sort of an edge and makes him appear more as something of nightmares instead of, a friendly circus clown that you could pretty much see anywhere.
In this part of the book, going back to the Georgie scene, it says he was wearing a baggy silk suit with great big orange buttons, a bright tie, electric blue flopped down his front, and his hands were big white gloves. And that really does resemble Tim Curry, like his outfit a little more, but just because it's not faithful to the book doesn't mean that it's a bad outfit, which I really do like about the new outfit, even though I really didn't have any problems with Tim Curry. And back at the Georgie scene, I feel like both the miniseries and the new movie couldn't really get the Georgie part just right. They both did really good, and really my problems are just small issues, like in this part he's talking about how Georgie saw his face change, and it says that it destroyed his sanity in one clawing stroke, which I really think is pretty.
It's very vivid.
Yeah, well, not really, since it talks about how like it was pretty much like the worst thing. It said what he saw was terrible enough to make his worst imaginings of the thing in the cellar look like sweet dreams. And really I think that it's very immediate. Like Pennywise's face change is very immediate from this wide grin to this like intense face that he just put on. But in both the miniseries and the book, it's a little more slow, since because
It's sort of gradual
yeah, it's
instead of just, popping out of nowhere.
yeah, and I really like the popping out of nowhere because it's not really expected,
Yeah.
but it's also it would be very scary to see how that would look like in real life.
And that would have been a good idea for the current movie, because that's kind of what it was aiming for more than the miniseries did.
But
what?
Oh, I was just gonna talk more about like I really liked Henry Bowers, since his character was a lot closer to the book. They really held back on him a little bit, but it seems like for the most part they did like what they could with his character. 'Cause, I mean, he's the bully, but in the book he like murders animals and everything, and that almost happened in the movie when he almost shoots the cat. But in the book, stuff like that would happen. But I did like what they did with the character. I thought it was really good, like with the mullet and everything, and especially how he looked compared to the miniseries. Because in the miniseries, he was like this greaser with like this this knife, and he just kind of waved it around at people.
Yeah.
But in the new one, he uses it, but then he loses it, but then he gets it back, and then he dies. Oh crap! That's a spoiler, isn't it? Well,
the book has been out for years. Just
yeah, it's fine. Nobody cares. But I really did like all the actors in there. They're really. I like the adult actors, but the kids were probably the best.
Yeah, the kids were the highlight of the movie.
Yeah, and that's. I really liked how that is, since like the book and in the movie is like centered around the kids, but in the next movie it's gonna be them when they're adults. And I was thinking like who they gonna get to play the adults, and I was like, oh crap, they're not gonna be able to get Bill Skarsgård because he's like probably gonna be like too old to play him. And I'm like, oh yeah, that's right, it's gonna be out in like 2 years. So they probably definitely will get Bill Skarsgård to play him again, which is something that actually is pretty cool to think about. But he could say no, but that's really, it seems unlikely.
Yeah, it does seem pretty unlikely, especially since he did a good job and he seemed to be pretty well received. And if it sounds like I'm praising this movie a little too much, it's really I think I am kind of, but it's very good compared to most movies that I see, especially in theaters nowadays. Um, in my expectations of this being, you know, a film as great as it turned out to be were pretty low. But I was definitely I was definitely wrong, and it was a pretty pleasant surprise to see how well it came out.
Yeah, I really think that everybody really just involved with the movie did a great job. Even like the director, I really like what he did with the movie, because I mean there were some stuff that I thought they could have improved on, but really it's just like small little nitpicks that really weren't important. So really they just did a great job with the movie. And I'm super glad how it turned out, since it's probably the best horror movie I've seen in a while, because a lot of the ones that I have seen are like Stephen King, which aren't always horror movies, like Stand By Me. But you know, like movies like The Shining, I can't really compare this movie to The Shining.
Yeah.
Yeah, but this movie was definitely really good, and it is very recognizable. A very recognizable Stephen King book, and a lot of people said that it was gonna be bad, really just because it's a remake. But with movies like this, I think that remakes can be bad, and they definitely are most of the time. But you could, and with Stephen King, it's mostly just you get it right or you get it wrong.
Mm-hmm.
Stand By Me again was one of the movies they definitely got right. But a movie like Pet Sematary really, I never read the book, but I did see the movie. The movie wasn't that great. I mean, the plot, really, which is just from the book, sounded pretty interesting. But, I mean, it sounded really interesting, actually, but just the way that they pulled that off was not great. But this is definitely one of the movies where they got it right, and I'm really... when I walked out of the theater, I was like, oh, man, the kids did such a great job in that movie, and I can't wait to see them in part 2. And then I remembered that they're going to be adults in the second one. And, I mean, they probably might have, like, flashbacks or something, but really that's it. So, really for the 2 hours that we got just, like, in the movie, like, from these kids, I think it was really great. And this movie really, when it ended, I wanted, like, to see more of, like the movie when they're kids.
Mm-hmm.
There were, like, some plot details that I really, like, they kind of bugged me afterwards. Like, who does Beverly live with when she killed her dad? Like,
she said she was moving to someplace.
So, really? I didn't.
She, like, at the end she says, someone she knows is gonna, like, take her in, and she said she was leaving, and then that was the moment, you know, when that was the moment at the end when she was talking to Billy, was it?
Bill. Yeah.
Yeah, Bill.
Yeah, so she just kind of got away with that. Nobody's asking how he does.
Yeah, that was a little disappointing.
Yeah, well, I mean, all of them do end up leaving except Mike, at least in the miniseries. I haven't. Oh wait, I think I did read that part of the book. I got past the adult part, but I'm just now starting the kids part of the book. But yeah, so I think that the second movie will hopefully explain a little bit of like what happened after the group split up, and I really hope that's the case. So really overall, it's a great movie. It's not like some cheap like cash grab horror movie. It's really like an actually good movie, and they actually took time on making sure that everything was perfect. So yeah, I guess that's pretty much it. That's really all there is to say for me. So yeah, if you guys like the show, be sure to like, comment, subscribe. We post new videos every week.
And goodbye.